As Precious mentioned, is that my name is Lucrezia, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vesta Social Innovation Technologies. Vesta is, like I said, we're creating solutions to really help individuals that have experienced gender-based violence, and we're on a mission to eradicate rape culture by helping improve their physical, emotional, and psychological well-being, by helping them navigate and connect to resources, both in the health sector, in legal, as well as police services and others. So Vesta actually started, to give you a little bit of background in 10 minutes, I realize it's a really short period of time, is that Vesta started as an idea back in 2017. But when I realized that my experience was not universal, really dove into quite a bit of research to understand how could technology or can technology play a role in helping survivors of sexual assault particularly. So not only did I dive into research here in Canada, but I also connected with researchers abroad, specifically in Australia and the United Kingdom. Those in the United Kingdom were so great that they actually sent us a Google file actually of their research to help us understand gender-based violence and the research that was being done about what they called written response protocols. Because as you can imagine, disclosing a sexual assault verbally to someone is quite different than if you're looking at a written response or trying to put it in an online system. So the researchers in Australia actually were so great, as not only did they provide us with some of their research, but they also acted as beta testers for our initial solutions, because they had actually experienced some kind of, in Australia, they did have alternative reporting options. For some of you that might be aware, is that when we were first looking at research, one of the protocols we stumbled across was third-party reporting here in Canada. And the reason why that was important to us was because the more survivors we connected with, the one thing that kept coming up over and over again was if we asked them if there was one thing that would have encouraged you, or perhaps you would have considered coming and reporting, was there one thing? And what we kept hearing over and over about was this idea of anonymous reporting or third party or alternative types of reporting options. So that was very important to us, and we started on that journey, which at that point we had connected, and we were very fortunate that Women and Gender Equality Canada agreed with us that this was a worthwhile subject to consider, to look at how we can use technology to support survivors. So with that, we also delved into quite a bit of research here in Canada, because we started to realize that although there was a lot of research out there, what we were specifically looking for was also research at the intersection of technology and sexual violence. And so what we did was we actually then partnered with the UBC, and we have now been able to publish 2 research papers. Specifically, one of them was towards understanding privacy and trust in online reporting of sexual assaults. And the second one was the dual nature of technology and sexual abuse, which I'm proud to say was just presented last week at a security conference. So as I can talk mostly about that research, but I'll move on and saying, but apart from the research that we were doing, how can we have a practical application of what the research shows? And I'm not going to dive into the details, because there's been some fantastic presenters before me that have really indicated quite a bit of their own research that seems to have quite a bit of parallels with some of the stuff that we have found as well. So as we said then, but the ones that we were specifically focusing on are, what about some of the concerns around using technology in this particular space and sector? And then how do we go about building trust into some of these online systems? So from there, we went to start creating Vesta Community. So Vesta allows individuals then, it's a web application. And the one thing that started coming up over and over again in our research was that individuals weren't necessarily looking at reporting, but they were looking for resources and understanding what had happened to them. And so although there's a lot of information out in the world and on the internet, it was really challenging to navigate those spaces. So we thought, if we can start building a central hub where individuals can find resources that were related to health, legal, mental health, physical health, reporting options, resource guides, and we started putting that together. So that's what we did. Then we started looking at, our research also showed that over 40% of individuals indicated that one of the reasons they didn't come forward and report was because they feared a he said, she said situation and that they didn't have enough evidence to support their case. So we started thinking about what if there was a way for an individual to document their experience in a trauma-informed question and answer format, and then they can preserve that document as well as attach any social media files, any text messages, Facebook, anything that they had, and attach it to there and preserve it. Just like the way we preserve physical evidence in a sexual assault evidence kit, what about if they can do that with their story? And then they can save it and do nothing if they didn't want to do anything with it. Or if they did, we would help them if they wanted to connect directly to police. We would allow them to do that by asking for their consent, and then we connect them with law enforcement. Now, one of the reasons why is we've partnered with law enforcement to pilot this, if you will, is that we wanted to see that, again, some of the initial disclosures to police, as others have mentioned in these earlier in presentations, is that that initial contact with police can be such a negative experience. And the research showed that over 70% of individuals that connected to law enforcement had a negative experience. And the way they qualified their negative experience was not about whether charges had been laid or whether there was outcomes in terms of if an individual then was held accountable by the courts, but rather their initial contact with police. So we thought if we can help overcome those initial barriers, a fear of not being believed, of not taking seriously, and if we can flip the switch and have police approach them after they have given consent, would that be a better experience? We also have the opportunity to report anonymously, because again, as individuals came up, was this idea that they didn't necessarily want to have any form of investigation into their specific instance, but they wanted someone to know, and they wanted the opportunity for their voice to be heard, and that it would matter, and that perhaps it didn't happen to someone else. So if we give them this opportunity to report anonymously for intelligence or statistics purposes. And lastly, the last one that has come up as an option is this opportunity is to disclose to campus sexual violence prevention offices. Because as we've realized is that some of the individuals that are accessing our system are actually university students. And as much as helping them also connect with sexual assault centers in their community, sometimes those individuals aren't very well versed as to some of the campus-specific resources that are available to them. So with one entry point, individuals then have access to resources, online sources, counseling, police, and on-campus resources. So how did this come about? Is we realized that technology is just a tool, and a technology in and of itself cannot solve the problem. It has to be part of a supportive system that's around it, and that by building a community and having individuals then, so you combine online and offline resources to support survivors. So we created what we call this kind of hub model. So individuals can access one point, but then access different services as they go along. Because as was noticed actually in some of the more previous presentations, is that sometimes individuals think that if they don't file a formal complaint, either with their school or file a report with the police, they cannot access resources, but they can. So by putting them all together and giving them some visibility into that, we hope that we'll have more individuals access resources. And some of our research actually indicated that by providing survivors the ability to report anonymously or to access information, over 85% of them would seek out services. So how did Vesta Campus come about? The long-term vision for Vesta, quite frankly, when I first started working on it, was that I thought that eventually we would have a solution that was geared directly towards campuses. But what we came to realize was that universities were interested not just in having a standalone system for themselves, but they liked the idea of being integrated into our campus-based solution. Into our community-based solution. So therefore, their students with a click of a button could create their record, can access resources, can access supports, both on and off campus, and if they wanted to, report or disclose. So I'm going to wrap up really quickly. How it helps students is that we realize that there is no one size fits all solution. And we wanted to create this hub model so that by giving them choices, making sure it was trauma informed, it helps them build some resilience and reduces some of that re-traumatization by giving them this added sense of control and giving them that decision along the way that they can choose their own path, and by not forcing them down any one specific path at all. How it also helps institutions is that by creating some of the visibility into that underserved population that doesn't come forward and file a report or a complaint. We all know that a small percentage of individuals are coming forward, but the challenge is that by those that don't come forward, how do you provide resources? How do you allocate resources to understand if you can meet the needs of your student population? So by allowing individuals then to access different points of entry in the system, we start creating some visibility, if you will, under the iceberg, and to see under the water to see what else is out there. So I realized that was really short. I hope I kept under my 10 minutes, but that's Vesta. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.